Okay, let's get into it. For our deep dive today, we are really going back to the source, to the origin story of house music.
Exactly. We're going to trace how this whole cultural revolution, this sound, it all came together from technology, from defiance in one city.
And it created the blueprint for, well, pretty much all modern electronic dance music.
And if you're following along with our sources, you'll see it's a story of necessity. So we should probably start with the absolute core element, the foundation.
The 4-on-the-floor beat.
That's the one.
That constant driving pulse, boom, 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 the kick drum on every single beat. It's so simple, almost primal, but it's the engine for everything else.
And before it was house, that engine belonged to disco. But by the late 70s, that engine was starting to sputter.
Yeah, let's set the scene. We're in Chicago. It's about 1977. Disco is absolutely massive, but it's also fragile.
Very fragile. You've got the Bee Gees, Donna Summer, the whole Studio 54 glamour thing dominating the charts. But just under the surface, that backlash was building. The disco sucks movement.
And we have to be clear, that movement was often just a thin veil for some pretty ugly, homophobic and racist feelings against the very communities who loved the music.
Right. So when the mainstream started to turn on disco, the people who actually needed that music, for whom it was a lifeline, they didn't just stop dancing.
They just went deeper underground. And in Chicago, on the South Side, that meant the Black and Latino LGBTQ plus communities started creating their own spaces.
Safe spaces. Sanctuaries, really. Places to be free without any judgment. And out of all of these places, one became the stuff of a legend.
The Warehouse.
The Warehouse.
It was at 206 South Jefferson Street, a former industrial building, 3 stories, and strictly members only. And the party hours alone tell you everything.
Oh, yeah. What were they?
They would start at midnight on a Saturday and go until noon on Sunday.
12 hours.
12 solid hours of dancing. I mean, just think about the kind of commitment that requires. This wasn't a place for 3-minute pop songs. This demanded something else entirely, something hypnotic.
And the person conducting that ritual, the high priest of that sound, was Frankie Knuckles.
The Godfather.
He'd already made a name for himself in New York, playing with Larry Levan, who would, of course, go on to define the Paradise Garage. So Knuckles arrived in Chicago with some serious credentials.
And he wasn't just a DJ in a club. He built an entire world. You can't talk about the Warehouse without talking about the sound system. It was designed by Richard Long.
And from what everyone says, it was just immense. The bass wasn't something you heard, it was something you felt physically. Crystal clear high frequencies. The speakers were placed so the sound was everywhere. It completely enveloped you.
People who were there describe it as a spiritual experience, a release, through pure vibration.
So who was in that crowd?
It was overwhelmingly Black and Latino, heavily LGBTQ plus Wong, and the ages ranged from 18 all the way up to 50. It was a true community built right there on that dance floor.
Okay, so Frankie has this dedicated crowd for 12 hours. House music doesn't exist yet as a genre. What is he playing to keep them locked in?
His musical taste was so specific, he completely ignored the commercial, fluffy disco that was on the radio. He was digging for deep cuts, for Philly soul and soul records.
So we're talking Soul Orchestra, First Choice, MFSB, and especially the incredible Loliata Holloway, tracks with these huge driving bass lines and powerful gospel-trained vocals.
That was the heart, that was the soul of the sound, but he was also looking to the future.
He started bringing in these European electronic records, Italo disco for sure, like Giorgio Moroder, but crucially, he would play Kraftwerk's Trans-Europe Express.
Which sounds a million miles away from a soul diva, right? It's cold, it's robotic, but it had that hypnotic, repetitive pulse that just worked.
He wasn't thinking about genre. He was thinking about rhythm and feeling. And this is where his real innovation comes in, with the reel-to-reel tape machine.
Yeah, break this down for us. This is incredible.
Well, he realized the records he had weren't perfect for a 12-hour set, so he started making them perfect himself, live, in the booth.
With tape and a razor blade.
Literally, he would physically splice the tape. He'd cut out the verses he thought were boring, take out a horn section, and then find the one part of the track, the break, that drove people absolutely wild, and he'd loop it.
So a 4-minute song becomes this 10-minute monster tailor-made for his dance floor.
Precisely. He was extending intros, creating these massive breakdowns that would build and build tension for minutes on end before he'd drop that kick drum back in.
No way.
It was basically live production. He was a producer before that was even a concept for a DJ.
He was inventing the tracks he needed because the technology to create them from scratch just wasn't there yet, or at least it wasn't affordable. And when it finally arrived, It arrived as a total failure.
This is my favorite part of the story. The technology that built house music was all based on accidents and commercial flops. First up is the Roland TR-808.
The 808, iconic now, but when it came out in 1980, it was a joke. Why?
Because Roland marketed it to musicians as a realistic drum machine, and it sounded nothing like real drums.
Not even close.
The snare was this thin little snap, the cymbals were just static, and the bass drum. I mean, the bass drum was this ridiculously deep, boomy thing with a long decay. It didn't sound like a drum, it sounded like a low-frequency cannon.
But that wrong sound, that huge boomy kick, was exactly what you needed to anchor a track on a massive club sound system.
It was perfect. And the best part, because it was a commercial failure, Roland stopped making them, so they flooded all the pawn shops.
Ah, so they became super cheap.
You could pick one up for next to nothing. All of a sudden, these producers in Chicago had access to this incredibly powerful, programmable rhythm tool.
Okay, so that's the drums. Then you have its even stranger cousin, the Roland TB-303 bass line from 1981.
Another flop. This one was supposed to replace a bass guitarist for solo musicians to practice with.
And I'm guessing it didn't sound much like a bass guitar.
Not at all. It had this weird, buzzy, almost harsh electronic tone. But the Chicago producers who got their hands on it found the magic was in the control knobs.
The resonance and cutoff.
Exactly. They figured out that if you just started twisting those knobs while a pattern was playing, you could make the sound. No, you could make it squelch and squeal and scream. It was this liquid, psychedelic sound that no one had ever heard before.
A completely new texture.
Born from totally rejecting what the machine was supposed to do. That is the essence of house music.
Drums, bass. And then the final piece of the puzzle shows up in 1984. The Ensoniq Mirage.
The Mirage was the game changer. It was the first sampler that was actually affordable, under $2,000. Before that, sampling was something only major pop stars could afford to do in $1 million studio.
And now a kid in his bedroom in Chicago could do it.
Right. They could do digitally what Frankie was doing with tape. They could grab a string stab, a horn hit, or most importantly, one of those soulful Loliata Holloway vocal wails.
And just play it like an instrument.
You could chop up a single word and create a whole new rhythm out of it.
Yeah.
It cemented that DIY ethic. Why bother with a whole record when you can just sample the best 1 second of it and build a universe around it?
So by 1984, all the tools are on the table, the technology is cheap, it's in the right hands, and that DIY spirit is just on fire. This is when we go from Frankie's edits to actual house music.
This is the moment. January 1984, a Chicago DJ named Jesse Saunders puts out a track called On his own little label, Jesse Records.
Yeah.
And that is widely considered to be the first house record ever made.
And the story behind it is perfect. Apparently, he was getting ready for a set and realized a specific Italian disco import he wanted to play was missing from his crate.
So instead of just playing something else, his thought was,
I'll just make my own version tonight.
Pure necessity. And that track had all the elements.
Yeah.
The driving 808 kick, a simple synth bass line, and that hypnotic, repetitive structure built for one thing and one thing only, continuous mixing on a dance floor.
And once that door was kicked open, the other classics started pouring out. You had J.M. Silk's Music is the Key, and Frankie Knuckles himself finally got into the studio and made your love with that iconic, squelching 303 bass line.
Right. And by 1985, the sound finally gets its name. The story goes the kids started going into the local record stores on the South Side, asking for that music they play at the warehouse.
Or that house music.
And the name just stuck. It was perfect.
But this is where the sound really starts to fracture and find its darker side, its edge. Because for as important as Frankie Knuckles was, you have to talk about his polar opposite, Ron Hardy.
If Frankie Knuckles was the Godfather, smooth, soulful, elegant Ron Hardy over at the Music Box was pure chaos.
A sonic anarchist.
Totally. His sets were faster, louder, way more aggressive. He would push the sound system into the red. He'd play records at the wrong speed just to see what would happen. If Frankie's club was a sanctuary, Hardy's was a pressure cooker.
And he played weirder stuff. He was dropping in harsh European industrial tracks and EBM electronic body music right next to soul records. It was jarring and intense.
And that's crucial. Knuckles gave house its soul, but Ron Hardy gave house its raw, undeniable edge.
And that energy inspired a whole new wave of producers. You get Marshall Jefferson in 1986 with Move Your Body, which he literally subtitled the house music anthem.
Then you get Larry Heard as Mr. Fingers, who pioneers deep house with Can You Feel It? It was slower, more jazzy, more introspective. It gave the genre emotional depth.
And then, of course, the 303 comes roaring back. The group Future, with DJ Pierre, basically invents acid house by accident.
Well, a happy accident. They were just twisting the knobs on their 303, trying to see how far they can push it, and they created this bubbling psychedelic sound that became acid tracks.
An entire global subgenre born from one experiment in a Chicago bedroom.
It's incredible. And you also had pioneers like Chippy defining that frantic jacking style with Time to Jack, and Adonis with the classic No Way Back.
And the sound finally breaks out of Chicago when Steve Silk Hurley's Jack Your Body goes to #1 on the Billboard charts in 1987. House music was now on the world stage.
But we can't forget the context, the social reality that made this music so necessary.
Right. This wasn't made in fancy studios.
No, not at all. Chicago in the 80s was hit hard by deindustrialization, by unemployment. This was working class music, DIY music. The fact that the tools, the 808, the 303, were just cheap, discarded consumer electronics is so important. It was music made from the scraps of capitalism.
And you have to remember the human element, the early and mid-'80s. This was the height of the AIDS crisis, which was devastating the gay community, the very heart of the warehouse.
These clubs, this music, it was a release, but it was also a refuge. It was a place to find joy and community and just liberation when the world outside was full of fear and death. This was survival music.
And it was, like we said at the start, a reclamation. After the Disco Sucks movement tried to kill dance music, the communities that created it just took the core element, that four on the floor, beat stripped everything else away, and built something new, something stronger on their own terms.
So let's try to synthesize all of this for you. If you want to know the sonic DNA of house, it really boils down to 7 key things.
Okay, #1, the kick. The relentless four on the floor. Boom, 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 boom. The heartbeat. #2, the tempo, usually somewhere between 118 and 135 beats per minute. The perfect speed for that hypnotic flow state.
Third, the hi-hats. You almost always have an open hi-hat on the offbeats. It creates that shuffle, that chicka-chick sound that pushes the groove forward. Fourth, the bass line. Simple, repetitive, and locked perfectly with the kick drum. They work as one rhythmic machine.
Fifth, the vocals. They're often soulful, powerful, but they're used like an instrument. They're chopped up into little mantras, jack your body, feel the rhythm that build tension.
Sixth is the structure. It completely rejects the pop music verse-chorus thing. It's all about long builds, repetition, and adding or subtracting one little element every 16 bars to keep the energy moving.
And seventh, its purpose. The tracks are designed for DJs to mix seamlessly. That's why they have those long intros and outros and those big breakdowns. It's all about creating one continuous journey.
And that's the story. Chicago, 1977. The Warehouse. Frankie Knuckles. Failed technology being repurposed by a marginalized community to create a brand new sound that, by 1985, had a name. House music.
It's so much more than just a genre of music. It really is the foundational template for almost every form of electronic dance music that came after it. Techno, trance, garage. You can trace it all back to that 808 kick in Chicago.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to take away. Think about how many truly vital cultural movements throughout history are born from people taking abandoned spaces and rejected technology, and using them to create something the world has never seen or heard before.
The sound of necessity really is the sound of revolution, and that's the power of the house music origin story.